Hi everyone, in today's video I wanted to expand on the triad pair concept which we explored in the last video. If you haven't yet checked out the lesson on triad pairs, there's a link in the description for it. I recommend first giving it a watch because in this video I'm going to show how we can use the triad pair concept together with a technique known as false fingerings to craft interesting and modern phrase ideas when only using triads. So in this video, I'm going to explain what false fingerings are and the unique reason why I think they can be incredibly beneficial when using triads to describe harmony within your solos. We'll break down a constructed phrase which we'll use to demonstrate this idea, and as always, stick around to the end as we'll also get into some pattern ideas and exercises that will help you develop your ability to use fake fingerings when improvising. Quick reminder, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, be sure to hit that subscribe button below to stay up to date on all the latest videos. And for those looking to dive deeper into the material or explore more concepts and access the PDF resources for all my videos, don't forget to check out my Patreon page. Alright, let's do it. So false fingerings, or fake fingerings as I've always called them, are essentially when you play notes that are the same pitch but in different positions and on different strings of the guitar. This creates subtle tonal variations for the same note due to the differences in string gauge and timbre. For example, we can play the same pitched E note on various strings. Each position produces a slightly different timbre because of the different tension and thickness of each string. Even though playing E on the B string is the same pitch as E on the A string, you can hear how the notes have a completely different quality to the sound. Now this technique likely originates back a long way for various wind instruments, but I was first introduced to hearing it through saxophone players, where they would use false fingerings to play the same pitched note rapidly in succession within a pattern or phrase. Now, this technique also works really well on the guitar, and it can be a really great way to add fluidity to your playing. For example, if we took a repeating 7-note pattern that went A, C, C, A, G, 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 if we try playing this with some speed, it's actually really awkward to do. I can barely play it consistently, and even if I could, the phrasing just doesn't sound very fluid. But if we use this fake fingering concept so that every repeated note gets played on a different string and fret, then it's going to allow us to execute this pattern at much faster speeds, so something like this. So I'm also able to now use some extra slurs with hybrid picking for a much more fluid execution and phrasing. So that's one of the main technical and sonic benefits to using this technique. However, another unique benefit which pairs really nicely with triads is the ability to fill up rhythmic space within a bar with multiple notes, even when we're limiting the phrase to have only a small selection of notes like a triad. For example, on the guitar, arpeggiating multiple octaves of a triad can actually be quite awkward. We can also run out of range or use up all of the notes quite quickly. For example, here's almost 3 octaves of an A minor triad. So as you can see, this is only filled up one bar and isn't necessarily the most fluid thing to play, even if we play it with a slightly better fingering like this. We've still exhausted all of the notes of this A minor triad within this position and have run out of range. So when improvising only using triads, it can be really hard to play constant 8th note or 16th note lines at a fast tempo, just because we have to jump around the neck quite a lot. But if we incorporate some false fingerings, we'll be able to fill up the bar with more notes as well as get a much more fluid sound, which should also allow us to have the option to stay within a similar range of the fretboard as well, even though we will have to do some stretches, so something like this. This is still only using the same 3 notes of an A minor triad, but we've extended it to fit over 2 bars instead of just 1. Let's do it again by descending down an A minor triad. But let's really make use of the possible false fingerings to play a fluid pattern that still only uses these same 3 notes. Here's the simple 8-note pattern which will play from each chord tone of the triad. Now with the false fingerings. It sort of creates an illusion that there's more movement in the phrase than there really is. Now, where this can get really interesting is if we use this technique while thinking about pairing various triads together to create modern phrases. This is where the triad pair concept can come in, but before we get into that, let's say we want to construct a sort of outside tension phrase over an A minor vamp. Now, there are loads of harmonic choices to make this happen, but without getting too much into that, as that's a topic for a separate video, let's think about using 3 minor triads and major third apart. The thought process behind this is that it's common to use the augmented scale and the axis of 3 major triads and major third apart to build outside sounds over major chords. So let's get creative and try a similar process but with minor triads and major third apart to create outside sounds over minor chords. So over A minor, we'll be blending an A minor, F minor and C sharp minor triad and only using those notes together with fake fingerings to help pad out the line. Voice leading is going to be really important for this to make sense and flow, and it should sound pretty hip over a fusion-esque A minor 7 vamp. So we're starting with 2 beats of the A minor triad, which voice leads from the 5th into the root of the F minor triad. We then voice lead from the root of the F minor into the 3rd of the C sharp minor triad. After implying the C sharp minor, we then resolve back to A minor by targeting the root. This idea also works great when only using 2 triads. For any of you who remember my very first video where I showed how we can organize the A minor blues scale into an A sus4 and C minor triad, well, I love pairing those 2 triads together and applying fake fingerings for a really modern blues scale sound. So speaking of only using 2 triads, let's now incorporate this technique with the triad pair concept from the previous video by breaking down a phrase idea. Let's change key to C Dorian and find its triad pairs. Remembering what we discussed in the previous video, that the triad pairs are found on the 4th and 5th degree of the parent scale. Well, the parent scale of C Dorian is B flat major and the 4th and 5th of B flat is an E flat and F major triad. So those are going to be our triad pairs for C Dorian. Let's build a phrase that uses both these triads with false fingerings to help fill up the bar with a fluid execution. Let's start by cycling through the inversions of an E flat major using false fingerings to repeat the last note of each triad inversion. From here, we can now voice lead into the root of the F major triad. After playing the F, we can do this sort of 5-note pattern using the notes of the F major triad. We'll add an extra note on the last one so that it rhythmically lands on the beat. Putting the 2 triads together. If we want, instead of separating both triads into different bars, we can try the same sort of idea but alternate between both triads on each beat. So in this case, I'm alternating between a root position E flat major triad and an F major triad in first inversion. Now, what's great about doing all this work to develop these fake fingering ideas is that because we're applying it to the triad pair concept, all of these phrases we learn and develop can be used for other scales for different harmonic functions. As we defined triad pairs in the last video as being two major triads found next to each other within a harmonized scale, well, not only will these phrases work for modes from the major parent scale, but we can also use them to imply sounds from the melodic minor parent scale as well. E flat and F are the major triad pairs for B flat melodic minor. And so we can experiment by playing this phrase over an A altered scale because A altered is the seventh mode of B flat melodic minor. A altered functions as a dominant 5 chord tension, so we can have some fun resolving this phrase to either a D minor or D major chord. That was A7 resolving to a D minor sound. Let's try the same thing but resolve to a D major instead. Let's do the same thing, but with the first triad pair phrase we came up with. If we wanted to, we can actually keep the fake fingering idea going as we resolve by using triad pairs for the resolution chord as well. Let's say we're resolving from A altered to D minor. We'll use our same E flat and F major triad pair phrase for the A altered, but when we resolve, let's bring out a Dorian sound for the D minor. The triad pairs for D Dorian are F and G major, so we can alternate between those two triads with fake fingerings as well. Okay, so before we end the video, I wanted to share some simple triad pair exercises to help you get started with incorporating false fingerings. Sticking with the E flat and F major triad, this first one pairs two inversions of the same triad and uses a false fingering to connect them. So if starting with the root position, it will pair with the inversion below it, which would be the second inversion. And of course, using the false fingering to connect them. We can then move up a tone to the next triad to do the same thing, and then we can cycle through each of the inversions with the same pattern. Instead of adding the next inversion below the first one, we can add the next inversion above instead. So if starting with the root position again, we can pair it with the inversion above, which will be the first inversion. Adding two false fingerings in each inversion works really well for this pattern. This pattern also works great starting from the lower string set, and in fact we can move around in various ways using the different inversions. Let's take an A and B major triad pair. For the A major, we can start with the root position going to the first inversion, and then when changing to B major, we can go first inversion to second inversion. That could be our pattern, which then gets repeated in the next octave. I've written out a bunch of different variations of exercises and patterns and phrase ideas on the PDF. You can find that on my Patreon page. Here's a really nice one that also uses chromatic approach notes to help voice lead the triads. So I hope you all enjoyed exploring this concept as much as I did. Fake fingerings aren't something that naturally find their way into my playing just yet, but it's definitely something I want to develop further for my improvising. I just love the sound and added dexterity this technique can bring. Also, after filming this video and playing all these phrases, my hands are incredibly warmed up right now, so I can definitely vouch for these ideas being a great exercise for coordination and getting the fingers primed before a gig. I also think this is such a good way to add a new technique to your vocabulary because we're not just learning a bunch of one-off licks. By connecting a new technique like false fingerings to a harmonic concept like triad pairs, we can develop phrases that can easily be applied to different harmonic contexts. Since the triad pairs apply to both major and melodic minor modes, the phrases built around this technique become so much more versatile. Instead of just collecting licks, we're creating adaptable musical ideas where we can pull them out for various harmonic situations. This is essential for improvising, and it makes learning phrases that are based around a challenging technique become a natural part of your vocabulary rather than just isolated flashy patterns. Anyway, that's all from me. Please give the video a like if you enjoyed it, and be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.